Okay.
Fred's been adopted for today with a Coast Guard on it.
Oh, that's good.
Nice.
What?
You've been adopted. Got the Coast Guard hat.
We like it.
I think so.
Huh?
I was in a
Dylan, go Navy, meet our man.
Coast Guard.
It's blue, not white.
Navy better win. Michael.
Hello, Beth. Good morning.
Good morning.
This is always a very special day in the life of the USS Slater. It's an opportunity for us to honor our sea service comrades in the United States Coast Guard. And we are honored and pleased that they are aboard today. I would invite you to stand for the presentation of the colors, followed immediately by the national anthem.
Attention! Carry colors. Forward. March.
And salute.
Color. Halt. Right. Face. Present. Arms.
Oh, say can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous night for the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets ran glad on bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Hosannas and star-spangled banner yet wave, o'er the land of the free and the hope of the brave. Pitchers Quartet, part of the Racing City Chorus. Well done, then. I would invite Dick Walker to the podium for recognition of the many Coast Guard personnel who are here today. Good morning. I would ask the people who fit the description to stand, and at the end we will give them a round of applause. Please be seated, and as your group is called, please stand up. First, Coast Guard veterans. Active reserve, Coast Guard veterans. Coast Guard personnel, they're up already. We have a vessel right on the other side. They showed up and brought their boat with them. Coast Guard Auxiliary. And we already had the crew of the Wire standing there. Do we have any local dignitaries or representatives? Well, we say thank you for you all being here.
Where's Kathy?
Well, your annual history of the U.S. Coast Guard. Sorry, Navy. In spite of what Admiral Zumwalt said, the United States Navy didn't come into existence until 1797. The Coast Guard came into existence in 1790. Now, I'm not demeaning the Navy, but the reality was when our War of Independence was won, the folks down in Philadelphia, I think that's where the capital was at the time, said, we are not going to support a standing military. The Army was disbanded, the Marines were disbanded, the Navy was disbanded. In fact, 7 or 8 very large warships being built for the Navy at the time were sold for junk. It was decided that if we needed defending, each state could provide the militia to do it. Well, we know where that ended up. Alexander Hamilton, Secretary of the Treasury, fully aware that the United States was going broke, realized that many people who lived along the coastline, who made big money and helped the cause of independence during the Revolution, were still doing the same thing. And customs duties were not being collected. So legislation was prepared that would authorize the building of 10 cutters to patrol harbors and intercept them who were still smuggling. It was known as the Revenue Marine Service. It is the great-great-great-grandpa of the Coast Guard. The Navy came into existence in 1797. And immediately upon the Navy coming into existence, Congress got the idea that, well, there were a bunch of guys who knew how to handle ships, so anytime these revenue cutters were needed for combat, they became part of the Navy, and that's been the history ever since. We're all well aware that the Coast Guard is conspicuous in the news these days. This is some of the interesting facts I was able to get on recent drug busts. July this year, $158 million worth of cocaine was intercepted off Southern California. July of this year, 186 million in cocaine was intercepted off Miami. June of this year, 23 million intercepted off San Juan. One of the big ones was in December of 2016, $715 million worth of cocaine was intercepted off Port Everglades. The Coast Guard served in every war that the United States has been involved in, either as the Revenue Marine or the Coast Guard. In 1915, a parallel organization known as the Life Saving Service was integrated into the Revenue Marine, and it became the United States Coast Guard. So the name hasn't been around that long, but the service has been around for 233 years. During World War II, almost 400 Navy ships and almost 300 Army ships were crewed by Coast Guard. 30 sister ships to the Slater were crewed by Coast Guard. By the way, the Navy said, you're not supposed to put any Coast Guard identification on our ships. But the Coasties got back at them. For those of you who know what an LST is, the big, long landing craft with the big doors and the ramp that would discharge trucks and tanks and things like that on a beach. There's a famous photograph of 3 or 4 of them lined up on some island in the Pacific. And after the doors were opened up, inside on the transom, each one was neatly stenciled USCG. So they weren't identified on the outside, but as soon as somebody came through the door, they knew who. On an average day, this is what the Coast Guard does. Conducts 45 search and rescue cases. Saves 10 lives. Saves over $1.2 million in property. Seizes 874 pounds of cocaine and 214 pounds of marijuana. Conducts 57 waterborne patrols of critical maritime facilities. Interdicts 17 illegal immigrants. Escorts 5 high-capacity passenger vessels. Conducts 24 security boardings in and around U.S. ports. Screens 360 merchant vessels for potential security threats prior to arrival in U.S. ports. Conducts 14 fisheries conservation boardings. Services 82 buoys and fixed aids to navigation. Investigates 35 pollution incidents. Completes 26 safety examinations of foreign vessels. Conducts 105 marine inspections. Investigates 14 maritime casualties involving commercial vessels. And facilitates the movement of $8.7 billion worth of goods and commodities through the nation's maritime transportation system. Just in case you think the Coast Guard doesn't do too much. I would like to identify some people who are Slater volunteers. Coast Guard. Over the years, we've lost a number of them. Some have passed away, some have moved out of state. But we have Doug Tanner. Doug, wave your hand. We have Gene Jackie. I guess he didn't show up. He was an icebreaker sailor. Grant Hack. And here's truly Dick Walker. Now, you hear this story every year, so I'm thinking of asking Shannon to make up a written exam next year so that you can't come aboard unless you pass the test. Glad you're all here. Charlie Boltonson is next with the story of the Coast Guard Auxiliary. I'll actually put on my reading glasses so I can see what I'm doing. One of the advantages of age, I guess. Good morning, shipmates, ladies, gentlemen, and guests. I'm Charles Fulton. I'm Task Division Commander of Division 15, U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary in Coast Guard District 1. Today we're here to celebrate the 233rd anniversary of the United States Coast Guard. Vicky's done a great job giving a little brief history of that. But as an integral part of Team Coast Guard, we also celebrate the United States Coast Guard Auxiliary, now in its 84th year of service to this nation. For those of you who may not be familiar with who the auxiliary is or our role with Team Coast Guard, let me give you a little bit of background. Coast Guard Reserve was authorized by an act of Congress on June 23, 1939, providing legislation allowing the use of civilian volunteers to promote safety on the high seas and the nation's navigable waters. The Coast Guard Reserve was then a non-military service comprised of unpaid, volunteer U.S. citizens who owned motorboats or yachts, and the prime focus then, as now, was recreational boating safety, or as I like to call it, preventive search and rescue. 2 years later, on the eve of World War II, Congress amended the 1939 Act with the passage of the Auxiliary and Reserve Act of 1941. This made the Reserve a military branch of active service, subject to being called up to duty, while the civilian volunteers, formerly referred to as the Coast Guard Reserve, became the Auxiliary. When America entered World War II, 50,000 auxiliary members joined the war effort, guarding waterfronts and ports, carrying out coastal picket patrols, rescuing survivors from scuttled ships, as well as anything else they were asked to do. Many of their private vessels were placed into active service. After the war, auxiliaries resumed their recreational boating safety duties. The auxiliaries' cornerstones, including education, operations, and fellowship, were established and remain our pillars today. Auxiliaries continue to be a growing and vital part of the Coast Guard. Under legislation passed in 1996, the auxiliaries' role was expanded to allow members to assist in any Coast Guard mission, except direct law enforcement and military operations, as authorized by the Commandant of the United States Coast Guard. Auxiliaries today can be found examining commercial fishing vessels, flying in C-130 aircraft, working in Coast Guard offices, and crewing with their active duty shipmates. Division 15 members have an area of responsibility that stretches from the Poughkeepsie area on the Hudson River to the Canadian border, including Lakes George and Champlain, west of Amsterdam along the Mohawk River, and includes Sacandaga Lake. We have units in Kingston, Albany, Schenectady, Lake George, Plattsburgh, and Burlington, Vermont. Auxiliaries can be found providing support in many ways to the Coast Guard. We teach boating safety classes, do courtesy vessel safety checks, whether it's a cabin cruiser or a kayak, perform safety controls for various on-water venues, support aids to navigation, fly ice patrols on the Hudson River, perform watchstanding at Coast Guard stations, line handling, and much, much more. More recently, the United States Coast Guard Auxiliary University program was developed, known as the AUP, since the Coast Guard has no ROTC program. This is a program established for students enrolled in the four-year degree program to provide a pathway for commissioning in the United States Coast Guard. Our mission is to provide a continuous resource of well-trained, viable officer candidates who can develop into career officers of the United States Coast Guard. The U.S. Coast Guard has an ever-increasing need for officer candidates, not only for service and air operations, but for environmental protection, marine science, legal, marine safety, engineering, facilities management, humanitarian assistance, nursing, and cybersecurity, just to name a few of the career paths open to successful AUP graduates. The AUP offers college students multiple levels of training, culminating with an active duty Coast Guard internship placement program. We currently have 5 cadets in those. The AUP graduation status, once the program courses are completed, The AVP draws its leadership philosophy from the active duty Coast Guard and the auxiliary. At present, the United States Coast Guard is looking to commission 500 new officers each year for the next 5 years, with less than half that number coming from the Coast Guard Academy graduates. The university program is striving to be the predominant source of the remaining 250 police officer candidates needed annually. So when the Coast Guard needs us, in many ways the auxiliary is there. We're proud to be here today, an integral part of the United States Coast Guard, and we adhere to its core values: honor, respect, devotion to duty. Semper Paratus. Thank you. Dan McCoy, the Albany County Executive, is otherwise in service this morning. He is a combat veteran, but he is represented by Michael Wally, who himself is a U.S. Marine Corps veteran. Michael?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So, I'm very happy to be here on behalf of Dan McCoy. He wanted to be here himself, but like he said, he's drilling right now with the Guard. Like Dan McCoy, I'm a veteran, and it means a lot to me that the volunteers out there are still taking care of this ship after so many decades. That the next generation, like my son Hank, is able to see this living museum, which is a fantastic thing. And even more importantly than that, it serves as a memorial to everyone who served in the Coast Guard before, stepping on this ship, giving some thought about the Americans and all the sacrifices that they gave for this country. So with that, thank you for having me, and happy birthday to the Coast Guard, all the active, and all those before it. Thank you.
Dick Walker made a special note of the fact that the Coast Guard cutter Wire is tied up alongside the Slater. As you surely will be able to see it, it's on the top side anyway. Arthur Banks, the skipper, is here, and I would ask him to say a few words.
Good morning. I am Chief Stuart Banks. I'm the officer in charge of Coast Guard Cutter Wire. I'd like to take a moment and thank Tim Rizzuto and his amazing staff for welcoming us here today. I'd also like to thank Dick Walker and Charlie Poltenson for their hospitality and helping to set this visit up for us. Now, I had the good fortune to meet Charlie before assuming command of Cutter Wire back in June, and he was eager to forge a relationship between these two venerable ships. Though not quite as old as Slater, Coast Guard Cutter Wire was commissioned in 1963, which means this is her 60th Coast Guard Day celebration. And I personally can't think of a better place to celebrate than here alongside this historic warship, but with the community that we serve on a daily basis. So, for those of you who don't know, Wire is one of 11 ice-breaking harbor tugs in service with the Coast Guard. Now, during the winter, our mission is to ensure that the waterways that you see behind you remain navigable, allowing critical deliveries of home heating oil to the communities of the mid-Hudson Valley. During warmer months, we will conduct maritime law enforcement as far north as Lake Champlain and service aids to navigation up and down the Hudson, thereby ensuring critical maritime waterways remains open. When I received orders for this assignment, many told me that it was a dream job, and having been here for several months, I can't help but agree. But the truth is, Wire is just one of hundreds of unique opportunities that the Coast Guard offers. Dick already ran through our average day, but behind every drug bust, behind every search and rescue case, behind every life saved, is a Coast Guard man or woman who volunteered to serve with our organization. As 36,000 active and just over 6,000 reservists, we are by far the smallest branch of the military. But I would say our impact on the communities that we serve is far outside. We serve right here at home. We live amongst the people that we work with, and every day we stand the watch, be it here in the continental United States or overseas on the Bering Strait, or in the Persian Gulf, or in the Western Pacific, and the waters around Guam. So, as we gather here to celebrate this 233rd Coast Guard birthday, let's remember those faithful crews of cutters, air stations, and small boat stations who continue to stand the watch for us here at home, always ready. Thank you.
I would invite you to stand as the Pitch Hitters Quartet sings God Bless America and remain standing as they retire the colors.
God bless America, land that I love, stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above, from the mountains to the prairies, to the ocean, white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home. My home. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above, from the mountains to the prairies, to the ocean, white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home. America, my home.
Port arms. Right. Face. Port arms. Port side. March. Boulevard. Halt. Order. Color.
Please be seated. As a veteran of the junior seagoing service, the U.S. Navy, it's my honor to salute all my Coast Guard comrades. I would ask our Executive Director, Tim Mazik, if he would say a few words.
I want to conclude this ceremony by saying thank you all for coming today. I especially want to thank our Coast Guard volunteers who played a major role in making this ship the ship that she is today, looking as great as she does. And I want to thank our Sea Cadets who add so much to this ceremony. But that's a long time to stay on your feet, guys. Thank you so much. And finally, I want to thank Dick and Charlie, and especially Shanna Schuster for putting this ceremony together. And if you'd like to partake in refreshments on the observation deck, we have coffee and pastries up there. And if you want to tour the ship, just check in at the gift shop to get you checked in. And all Coast Guard veterans are free for today. So thank you all for coming today.
you don't get to escape that quick. For those of you who wonder what a ship like the Slater, a destroyer escort, would have looked like if it was in the Coast Guard, look at the cake before the cake gets cut. There's a photograph on the cake of the destroyer escort Durant, D-U-R-A-N-T. It was one of 12 that were transferred to the Coast Guard in the early 1950s to be weather patrol ships. And it got the full Coast Guard treatment, the white paint, no racing stripe in those days. They had a big black W and the number after it, buff-colored stacks and things like that. So before Chief Bangs cuts the cake, I'm going to ask you if you want to see what a DE looked like in Coast Guard colors, take a look. And thank you all for being here.